Shanghai. So how many of the audience here have you been to Shanghai? Actually, that's a vast majority. What's your impression? What's your impression of Shanghai? Any volunteers? Impression of Shanghai compared to where you come from?
I was there in '89, so
yeah.
a while ago.
It's a while ago, yeah. And you haven't been there since?
I haven't been back since '89.
Right. So what's your impression in '89 then?
It was a very pedestrian-friendly city. You could walk everywhere.
Yeah, and there are not very many cars,
and
many bicycles. Yeah.
And it was nothing like what I know that it is now.
It is
no
now.
high-rises,
Yes. Anybody who's been there more recently? No? Well, I think you really are due a trip to Shanghai. So usually when I talk about I come from the city of Shanghai, people wouldn't have an image of this. This is the Shanghai that I grew up in. This is Shanghai in the 1970s, which probably isn't very different from the Shanghai that you saw in 1989. It's very pedestrian friendly. Public transportation is about the only way of getting about because most people didn't even own a bike. In those days, if you owned a bike or had a TV, you were really like having a Rolls Royce. It's the equivalent to having a Rolls Royce. So this is the Shanghai I grew up in, and I lived in housing, which is not very different from this. Back in those days, Shanghai is a city that's defined by the government definition as in the southern part of China. Which means it's south of this Qinling and Huaihe, a mountain and a river that divides northern and southern part. Everything north of China has central heating. Central heating means the heating is provided by the government. So on a certain day of the year, they turn it on and your house is warm for the winter season. And then on a certain day of the year, they turn it off. So it's like, it really is central heating. But Shanghai is like the furthest north of the southern part of Shanghai, of China, which means none of the buildings came with heating. So our house, our school, any hospitals you go to, any buildings that you go to, it didn't come with heating. It's just about okay. I mean, in the winter, the lowest temperature is about 0. It's not cold enough to kill you, but it is cold enough to make it fairly uncomfortable in the morning, winter morning, when you try to get out of bed, which is difficult for a student anyway. And if it's cold, it's like 0 degrees in the room. I mastered the skill of putting my layers and layers of clothes on inside my duvet. So when so usually you need like 2 or 3 layers of jumper. You have thermal underwear underneath your normal trousers. Then you put on a thick jacket. So that's the kind of housing I grew up in. School looked like that. So each class would have anywhere between 40 to 50 students. And contrary to what most people believe, actually in China, the better the school, the bigger the class size, because more people try to get into those schools. So if a school is a very good school locally, they tend to just squeeze in one more in. So good schools tend to have like 48, 49 people per class. The maximum is 50 in Shanghai. You can't go above 50. I can hear the shock from some of the audience. So teachers talking about, oh, the class of 24 is too big to teach. Come to China. And this is a market which looks pretty well stocked. And these are found from internet. This is not my old photo. I didn't have a camera back then. So food market like this, you can see lots of people and they're queuing. And in those days, many things are rationed. So you get a quota. You get coupons every month, depend on the household number of people. They give you coupon for rice, for milk, for vegetable. So when you go to the market, not only do you need to pay money, you also need to use the coupon. So if you run out of coupon and you want more meat, for example, you need to pay a black market price, which is much more than the usual rationed sort of price. And that's very, I think usually during wartime, that is the common measure, isn't it? Some people who lived in England during the wartime, they talk about such rationing. And I remember the meat rationing was as low as something like 2 kilos per person per month. So you really cannot have meat every meal, not even every day. So maybe 2 or 3 times a week, you get to have a small piece of meat, and which is usually sliced up thinly and then fried with some vegetable. You don't get a steak. A steak will use up all your rationing for the month. And thinking back, that was sort of, we were forced into this kind of diet. But when you think about it, that's probably healthy. I probably grew up with a pretty healthy diet. And the great thing about children is that we don't know what the norm is. We don't know we lived in underprivileged condition. And the good thing about communism is that your neighbor is just in the same condition as you. You know, your classmate, you all go to public schools. Nobody went to private schools. So your next door neighbor, your classmates, they're all similar. You know, the parents might be doing very different jobs, but the income was pretty similar. So I grew up feeling pretty happy and abundant. I certainly didn't feel underprivileged, and that was my childhood. And then I went through the very typical Chinese mainstream schooling. I went to one of the best high schools in Shanghai, which is a girls' high school. Then I managed to get into one of the top universities in China, in Beijing, Tsinghua University. Anybody who's Chinese would know this university. Even many people who are not Chinese would know this university. So the kind of education system I went through is almost the opposite of what is being described. Early on in one of the sessions, I was at David Steiner talking about the challenges of the American system. There's no curriculum. Teachers are not being trained to deliver set curriculum. There's no assessment to a certain curriculum. I thought that's just exactly the opposite of what I experienced in China. There is a very standardized, mandated curriculum done by the Central Ministry of Education. And the teachers usually graduate from what we call normal university. I think that's a word from the French system. They have this very famous university which trains teachers. They call it normal university. And those teachers spend 4 years being trained as a teacher and usually specializing in a subject. So even for primary school teachers, they specialize in either Chinese or math or English or PE. So even from grade 1 onwards in primary teaching, the norm in China is specialist subject teaching rather than class-based teaching. So they definitely know their subject very well by the time they graduate after 4 years of teacher training college. And then there's a continuous PD. So it's timetabled, I think usually about half a day every week in the state school, in public school in China, that teachers have to do some sort of PD. Most of the time it's school organized, but once a month I think it's district organized. So they will go to other schools in the same district and the district education authority would organize. And the standard testing, you know, that's famous in China. In my days, everybody sit a standard test at age 12, which stream you into different quality of middle school. Then again, another test at 15, which stream you into different quality of high school. And then again at 18, which is the Gaokao, the famous Gaokao, very high stake. You know, you only get one chance at it. And if you're just 1 mark lower on that standardized testing, you are basically ranked by computer. And you might be 300 positions below other people, and you might be failing to get to a university like Tsinghua University just because you are scoring 1 mark lower than somebody else in maths. That's the brutality of the over-standardizing, over-exam orientation, and very much almost like industrial line, very, very little differentiation or personal teaching or social-emotional nurturing. For that matter. I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating. For those of us who are Chinese who's been through that system, that is really what we went through. But there is one good thing about the system, which is meritocracy. So what universities you go to really is dependent on the outcome of this very high-stake exam. I mean, we can all talk about the deficiency of assessing pupil depending on a paper, pen examination. But that is still the most fair way of deciding, given that there are very limited resources in high quality education, who should get the opportunity to go to those schools. It is actually by, you know, whoever is most talented and willing to put in the hard work to score highly in those exams, they end up being the ones going. So that is still the university selection, the Gaokao, is still very much the system in China even now. So if you can get selected by a university, money is usually not the problem. Even a university like Tsinghua University, I think they now charge some tuition tuition fee, but I think it's just something like $1,000 or $2,000 per year. That's the tuition fee you pay. Even in a sort of developing economy like China, where people's income is much lower, usually the tuition fee of the university is not a barrier for people going to these top universities. So long as you can get yourself in, you can usually afford it. That's okay, so then I had a very different experience. 1 year into my Tsinghua education, something that I was part of the selection process of came to fruition. I was selected by the first time by a foundation called the Jardine Foundation, who usually sponsors 6 Asian students from Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore to go to Oxbridge in England. They pay a full scholarship for people to go. So in my high school, that was the first time one such position was sort of assigned to Shanghai. There was somebody in Hong Kong to say, these children in mainland China, they really are talented, they should be given a chance. So I went through a selection process. I wasn't, in the end, the person who got selected for that Jardine scholarship, because there was somebody who really, truly was better than me. So that's a fair win for her. But I impressed the provost of Oriel College in Oxford, who was on the panel of the scholarship selection committee, to say, you did very well. I'm offering you a place in Oriel College, Oxford. However, we can't afford to pay you. We can't afford, you need to find money to come to Oxford. And in those days, even though my parents are both university graduates, which were rare in their generation, they both have decent jobs. I think their salary in dollar terms were only even maybe a few $100s a month. So in those days, because the economy was still very different from the rest of the world, there was no way they could afford an Oxford tuition fee, which was, I think, for foreign students back then, £12,000 a year. That was astronomical figure for me. So I couldn't afford it. I had a place to go to Oxford. I couldn't afford it, so I went to Tsinghua instead. But 1 year later, a benefactor in Hong Kong who was a friend of this scholarship foundation who got me into the selection process said they found me a private benefactor who was willing to sponsor me through Oxford. So that became the change of life trajectory, isn't it? And the point I want to highlight this is that it's leading to something. So this is it gave me a taste of education system on both sides. I grew up in the very best K-12 education in China at the time, what China had to offer, and also I had the very best British higher education when I went to Oxford. I did computer science, BA of computer science. But another more important factor for the Oxford experience is that I brought back a souvenir from England. Martin was doing mathematics during the same time in Oriel College, and we didn't even start dating until we both graduated. So we became a couple, and when I came back to China back in 2002, he made the commitment that he's willing to go back to China with me. That kind of sealed the relationship. So Martin has been there now ever since 2002, which is over 20 years now, and we had these 2 beautiful boys. They're no longer this small. I mean, they're much bigger than this now, but this is about the cutest whole family photo I could find. By the time they become teenagers, we can't get a photo like that from them. And this is kind of why my journey with Wellington started, because I was a computer scientist. I worked for Intel Corporation for a decade in England, in Germany, and then back in Beijing. Why on earth would I be starting a school? Many people ask me, how do you, that's a bit of a change in career path. And I thought, there's no better motivation to somebody starting a new career path than satisfying their personal needs, I would say. So this is the classroom, very similar to what Daniel, my older son, was going to when she was in primary school. As you can see, apart from the furniture getting a little bit newer, the classroom really doesn't look very different. Daniel still had 49 students in his class when he spent 3 years in a Chinese primary school. It was a very good local Chinese primary school. I can't fault them. They were doing the very best they could do. But I could also sense that lack of intrinsic motivation. The pressure was all external. So even for very young primary school children, because the Chinese characters takes a lot of practicing for you to master. So he needs to do a lot of copying of the characters. I still remember the very first day I went to primary school, I come back with the assignment of writing my own name about 100 times, just so that I can remember how to write my name. You literally copy a whole row of 20 or 30 characters of the same character. And Daniel now Daniel is a very good mathematician, passionate about maths. Back in those days in the maths lessons, of course, they draw it into him, the times table, the mental arithmetic. There is these textbooks, there are these exercise books that go with the standardized textbook, which I think got a bit of publicity in the UK when UK was trying to study Shanghai maths. This is how we get fluency in maths. Like when you do addition, for example, 3 plus 5 or 4 plus 8, they have these exercise books. Like after every lesson you do, they give you 100 mental arithmetic problems to solve, like what is 3 plus 5, what is then 7 plus 9, 100 of them. And you're supposed to time yourself when you do this every day. So every day 100 of them, and you time yourself. And I remember Daniel later reflecting back and say, I could do them all, I can do it. But when I look at a whole page of 100 problems, I'm just fed up. You know, I could do them. None of them is particularly challenging, but and he was saying any of the subjects are similar. You know, none of them are particularly challenging. I could do them all, but I don't feel particularly passionate about any of these subjects. And that was the education that Daniel was having, which prompted me in thinking maybe we need to find a better way. But back then, I didn't want to send him to sort of a traditional international school, which were available in Beijing, because they would then teach entirely in English, which means for Daniel, which come from our family, you know, it's not a nice to have for Daniel and James, my two sons, to master both English and Chinese. It is actually a must-have. My parents don't speak very much English, so if my children cannot speak Chinese properly, they will feel very sad not being able to communicate with the grandchildren. And similar with Martin's parents in England. So for them to have an education where they can master both languages and be comfortable in both cultures is actually a very core need of our family. Which is why I started thinking maybe I can start a school myself so that my boys can go to my school. And the good thing about being young and naive is that when you have a good idea, you think you can make it happen. I was about 32, just old enough to be able to get certain things done, but young enough to be courageous enough to say, I'm going to resign from Intel, I'm going to try to make this happen, and I'll see if I can make this happen. And sure enough, sometimes when you know what you want in life, you talk to people about it. You say, you know, my parents thought I was mad to resign from Intel and keep talking about wanting to start a school. And sure enough, somebody heard about it and say, actually, we want a school. You know, our first school is in Tianjin. We want a school in Tianjin as part of this overall urban development. A good school would mean that we can sell our luxury apartment next to the school for a higher price. So when you put your idea out there, quite often there are people who hear it, actually it meets their needs. And that's the start of a great journey. So this is Wellington College, the Wellington College in the UK, who started this education festival more than 10 years ago, maybe 14, 15 years ago. And I approached them. Wellington is among a number of schools that I approached that I had this idea of running an international school with a partner in the UK. Are they willing to do it together with me? And Sir Anthony Selden, who's here, was the master of Wellington College back then. And he was a visionary. He was the person who started the Education Festival as well. He started a number of initiatives while he was the master of Wellington College in the UK. And I even just cold called him. I didn't know him. I just got his email address from a mutual friend who said he might be interested in setting up a school in China. I just cold called him, but he immediately replied to me saying, we are very, very interested. It just so happened that Wellington College saw having a network of globally connected schools as such a good way of bringing global perspective for their English students, English student body in England. So he had this vision of having a global network of Wellington schools in different countries. So he was already exploring to do something like that a couple of years prior to me approaching him. So all the stars were lined up pretty perfectly. So after 18 months of negotiation on the contract, by which time our school was nearly built. After 18 months of legal negotiation, we finally got to the point of signing this legal document. So this is Anthony Selden, Sir Anthony Selden, who was the master, and this is Sir Anthony Goodenough, who was the chair of governors for Wellington College in the UK at the time. This is myself, and this is Martin. Even up to that point, I was still just a one-woman shop. I didn't have any employee. I couldn't have any employee before this agreement was finalized. So because they had two people, I had to bring my husband to sign with me. But it does, I mean, this photo, when I look back, I do have a sense of pride of start of a great journey. And this is then became the school that my sons Daniel and James went to. This is Wellington College International Shanghai, which opened 2014. So both of my boys spent a vast majority of their schooling in this school. And this is the schooling and experience they get. I mean, this will be quite familiar with most of you here, because that's what you would expect to get from a quality premium education, holistic, and giving a student the choice. Try to nurture that intrinsic motivation so that they have a choice to try different things, but we don't force them to do anything per se. And in that process of exploring, they find their passion. So this shows, I mean, of course, we're very academically strong, but this shows an extensive sports program. Both of my boys are quite sporty. Daniel is a very good swimmer now, and they try different things. And this is also interesting. Neither of them are particularly artistic. So they can't sing, they can't dance very well. But we put on these beautiful musicals every year. So I encourage both of them to say, oh, just try it at least once. So they both managed to get a minor role in a school musical. You can see they're part of like a bigger group. They were never the lead character. And they both tried it once and then told me, Mum, we've tried it once, but we don't like it. I don't want to do it again. And I said, that's okay. You know, you've tried it, you decide that's not for you. Okay, you can carry on doing your swimming. For Daniel, it's electronics. I mean, these are things that he just made out of fun. It's not schoolwork. It's not an assignment. It's not for a competition. He just made these things because he enjoyed integrating hardware, software. You know, he imagined this is what he called a decimal clock. So it's 10 hours in a day, 100 minutes in an hour, and 100 seconds in a minute. And he made it happen, and it does work. And he even got a patent, like a patent out of it, a decimal clock. Yeah, so this does work. It goes around once a day. Yeah, so, and aesthetically, it's not very pleasing, but I mean, that's a good idea, right? He had a good idea, and he made it happen. And this is a physical controller for a game, the Kerbal Space Program, which is a computer game that imitates rocket launches. Usually you control it by the keyboard, but he made a piece of control that you can actually control the rocket by these knobs. And yeah, so I give him credit for, and he couldn't have done it if he had to spend 3 hours a day doing homework. So back then I was very worried because he seemed to have too much free time. You know, that's the contrast of the Chinese system where he would do these 100 maths problems. He would come home from Wellington saying he's done his homework or there is no homework. Then as an Asian tiger mom who grew up practicing for exam, and that's how I earned my success. That's how I got into the best university in China. It did make me nervous. Are you too happy? And we almost have this perception. If you're too happy now, you'll be miserable later down in your life. 要先苦后甜. You need to, suffer first to earn your happiness later in life. There's almost that perception in the Chinese culture. And so I was worried for a while until it became obvious that they are academically excellent and they are happy. Their well-being level is high. They have developed holistically, but more importantly, they found their passion in what they do. But so much talking about my own son. I think the best advocate for a school is our graduates. We're just very lucky to happen to have a top graduate of our Tianjin school, Angelina Huang, who's currently studying in Johns Hopkins University. So I'll give her a few minutes to describe her experience.
Hello, my name is Angelina, and I'm a freshman at Johns Hopkins University. I went to Wellington College in Tianjin, which is the first Wellington school, as Ms. Qiao mentioned. So the education I got in Wellington is very, very different than what we described as a traditional Chinese education. So I was very lucky to got into Wellington. And wait, I have to actually look at my face on the speech. Okay, I actually had a little starter question. I believe that everyone here, when you're in high school or when you're in college or even nowadays, you'll be thinking of, why am I waking up at 6 or 7 every day and do my homework or do your work until 11 p.m. just for school? But at Wellington, I think I really found the answer to this question. I didn't go to school because I want to earn a high school diploma or because I want to go to a very prestigious college like Johns Hopkins. I went there because I want to be me, want to be myself, want to be every single one of you wants to be yourself and you want to be more to your own community. So at Wellington, we're told to be learners and then change makers and then connectors. As learner, I used to be a very, very big procrastinator. In middle school, I never do my homework until the last minute. But at Wellington, I learned this very, very simple rule: see it, say it, sort it. It was the original slogan for London public transport. But it was very useful. See it, say it, sort it. When I spot a question or the topic that I'm interested in exploring, I would talk to my subject teacher or my college counselor, and they would provide me with the resources, or they would guide me to how I would continue my exploration. And then by joining all these traditional dress days or Chinese drama show and other cultural events at Wellington, I really found my own cultural identity as a Chinese. And with that pride in mind, I'm very, very confident right now to explore the different cultural diversity out here in the US and work with people from all different backgrounds towards the same goals, like shared prosperity, world peace, and bridging the culture from the west to the east. And about change makers, in Wellington we're kind of like a small school, and everyone knows each other, and we do care deeply about one another. So with the support and care and help from my teachers, my peer students, I was really brave enough to make big decisions for myself and organize charitable events to pass on the care and warmth to the wider society. So I was very proud to be involved in the Eric Little project, for example, at high school, where we mentored mentally disabled students in our local areas. And in that cycle, I kind of developed the ability to initiate things independently and to get things done independently, and also to have the habit of constantly learning new skills. So I was very, very proud of the project. And this really driven me to explore the numerous research and career opportunities. Wait, I found that I didn't forget this microphone. Okay. Yeah, so in the first 2 months of college, I was very proud to begin exploring all by myself in a brand new environment because I wasn't in the US for the past 18 years. But I got the chance to really talk to people, talk to professors, and talk to upperclassmen. And in the first 2 months, I got in a venture capital club and a hospital surgery shadowing program, and also a volunteering program at Johns Hopkins Hospital, which was very, very exciting. And so yeah, I was really lucky to really develop these abilities to start a new chapter of my life as a really global citizen. So yeah, that's my experience at Wellington. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing graduates like this are the biggest reward to what we do, isn't it? And I want to, and then the vision moved on a little bit. These Wellington schools are international schools in China, which by their definition of license can only be attended by pupils holding a foreign passport, an overseas passport, because the Chinese schools has a very strict mandate of following the Chinese curriculum. So I did have friends who complained to me, hey Joy, you run these beautiful schools, but we can't even come to your school. And at the same time, I was having the idea of actually combining the best of both worlds. I mean, regardless of how much Daniel suffered through his previous primary school, he does admit even now his solid maths foundation has benefited from that fluency practice in the early stages of his academic career. So I started these HIBA, so Huili International Bilingual Academy, acronym HIBA schools, which then compares and try to combine the very best aspect of Chinese and English or Western, more Western learning. So then we have all these. We have 3 substantial HIBA schools now in China. And this is like an indicative org chart just to show you how HIBA would work. So we will have a group of staff, so faculty and senior leaders who really are Chinese and Western mixed together. So this is a school not just led by Chinese leaders, nor are they by Western leaders. So in our Wellington school, it's mostly Western leaders. Only the Mandarin department are Chinese staff. But in our HIBA school, they really are a mixture, and they work collaboratively together, and their working language is English, which means even if you're a Chinese teacher in our HIBA school, you need to be fluent in English to be able to co-plan and collaborate with your Western colleagues. And this is something that is much harder to do than I imagined, but nevertheless we've made very good progress. And indeed, our HIBA students can have excellent outcome in GCSE and IB and A-level exams, all the while being able to score fairly highly in the standardized Chinese test at the age 15, which is actually unheard of. You know, the same group of students being able to do both. Bear in mind the Chinese exams are in Chinese, and the GCSE and A-level and IB are in English, which means they're mastering every subject in both languages and being able to do well in these subject tests.
These schools, your domestic Chinese citizens can go to?
Yeah, they're primarily for domestic.
Starting one here, any here?
Yeah, you're reading my mind. You're reading my mind. Right, so we already have a community of over 5,000 students in both our Wellington and HIBA schools in China. And the good thing is that, especially in the Wellington schools, they come from all over the world. And we have over 1,300 staff in all of our schools in China now. And you can see they come from 32 different nations. Vast majority of them are still from China because half of the teachers at least are Chinese and all the non-academic staff are Chinese. But a lot of them are from the UK. You can see the Wellington genes in our school, but also from all over the world. So it is the norm for us to work with people from all over the world to actually welcome and be curious about different perspectives in our schools. And I have a couple of staff profile. They are, this is Shane, who is a teacher in our Shanghai. You started in Shanghai and started in Shanghai and currently teaching our Nantong school. I just want to read out a couple of quotes from the staff. So Shane has been in China for 5 years now, 5th year with Wellington College China. And quotes from Shane: Chinese people are so welcoming and eager to share their rich history and culture. In a country of this size, there is so much to see, do, and learn. And different regions offer different insights of what it is to be Chinese. It is one of the safest countries to live in. Quite often, teachers from outside of China comment how safe they feel living in China. Children are really well looked after here and are valued in society. And the next staff we have, so this is Edward Beatty, who is from Angelina's teacher. So you can see Angelina very excited. So he has been in China for being with our group for nearly 10 years now. And he said, his comments are even more insightful. In many ways, I was expecting China to be stricter, as many news sources push the one-party authoritarian angle. I found, however, especially when venturing down the back streets and into the countryside, that there seems to be a sense of quite joyful mayhem, with street food, wandering animals, pop-up vendors, and random karaoke on street. Having first-hand experience of China has allowed me to see how skewed much of the media is in its knowledge and understanding of this subject. As a lifelong martial artist, it's lovely to live in a city where you can walk around carrying a sword on your back without somebody calling the police. So these are some of the perspective from our staff who's been in China with us for many years. Now, quite a lot of people comment to me, oh, what a wonderful achievement. You know, we're only about 15 years into this journey with Wellington in China, and we have built up these beautiful schools in China offering world-class education, and we're getting our students into the world's top universities. And I always say that's not because of me. I did work hard, but all of the development of Wellington, China is against the grand backdrop of the development of China. So if I put these two pictures, this is the picture I started with, right? And this is the city I live in now. My apartment is one of these tall buildings here. I live on the 59th floor of an apartment overlooking this beautiful Huangpu River. This is the transformation of China in the past 45 years. And this is what I'm sort of here to give the bigger picture. My own personal story is in this grand backdrop of the China story. China's effort accounts for 78% of the world's reduction in the number living in poverty. When you look at these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the number one is no poverty. So I think that's the very basic human rights, lifting people's standard of living to get them out of poverty. This is the China number. We lifted 853 million people out of poverty in the past few decades. And life expectancy, sustainability goal number 3, good health and well-being. You can see when in the late 40s, when China started, we were right down here. Very low, lower than India, much lower than the world average. And this is the chart of China quickly catching up. You can see it's already way above India, above the world average, even overtook United States in life expectancy during COVID. I don't know whether United States will go further up, maybe you will, but that's not bad. I mean, for a developing country where the GDP per capita is only 1/6 of the US GDP. So we're already having comparable life expectancy. UK, of course, does better because it has its NHS. This is development. So this is the bullet train network. In 2008, there was just one really fast line between Beijing and Tianjin. That line enabled me to do the project in Tianjin because I live in Beijing. I can get to Tianjin on this bullet train in 30 minutes. It's a 120-kilometer journey. Look at 12 years later, the bullet train network. China has 2/3 of the world's total in high-speed railway, 42,000 kilometers in total. The rest of the world added together is 17,000. I think that number might be 0 in the US. Bullet train, do you have that in the US? public train? No? Yeah, there you go. I think that's worth an experience if you go to China. And very affordable too. They're very affordable public transportation. Again here, EV, electric vehicle sales. China's electric vehicle sales is more than 50% of the world's total, which means we actually, in China, we buy more electric vehicles than the rest of the world added together. This is United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 7, I think, clean and renewable energy. Massive, so affordable mass transportation system. And the Chinese government can do that because they can use both a carrot and a stick. They give tax break for people who buy electric vehicle, but they also charge, they use a lottery system to offer number plate, for car number plate. If you want to buy a conventional car, you need to enter a lottery. You don't know when you can get a number plate. And even when you do get a number plate in Shanghai, you need to pay about £10,000 for it. But if you buy an EV, you get the number plate immediately and for free. So the Chinese, it's an authoritarian government, right? Imagine if you're in a election, government like that will get elected out probably. But nevertheless, it serves the purpose of the transitioning into electric vehicle. Education. This is something that, again, so in 1990, you can see only 2 or 3% of Chinese people enroll in tertiary education. And that number is now 63%, which is actually close to the UK. UK is 69%. US is very high, 87%. But this morning we heard somebody arguing maybe that number is too high. People should be engaging more in technical and vocational education. And I give this chart here. This is the China adult literacy and the China female literacy versus that of India. You can see both countries are growing very fast in literacy. So education is developing rapidly. But you can see the gender equality in China being much higher than India. India's female literacy is behind, way behind the adult literacy. But the one-child policy of the Chinese government actually probably did the most in terms of giving girls an equal access to education. Because for any parents, if you only have one child, you're sending that child to school, right? So the Chinese female, and I think maybe female everywhere, we're doing well in universities. Yeah, many universities have female enrollment overtaking the male. So that's, again, sustainability goal number 4, quality education. I mean, all of these things are happening. So if you ask, I mean, this is a survey. I don't think it's done by China. It's on this website, Statista. If you ask people how optimistic they are about the future, in China, that percentage is very high, 76%. People are optimistic about the future because you can see life genuinely gets better year after year. In a decade, it certainly is transformatively better. Worldwide average is 42. I think US is doing pretty well. More than 50% are optimistic, but in some parts of Europe or Italy, France, Japan is very low. So, but Chinese people are among the most optimistic in the world, and these are changes over time in their own self-reported satisfaction, life satisfaction. So the absolute level, China might not be leading, but you can see in the past decade, the change in life satisfaction has gone higher. Which brings me to nearly the end of my presentation now. I mean, all these positive things going on in China, but nowadays when you look at the global media and the public opinion of various different countries towards China, I just happen to pick out US, but if you look at the UK or other European country, Western democracies, it's similar. In the past 10 years, there has been a significant increase in negative opinion about China in the US, and a significant decrease in unfavorable opinion in the US, because these two are correlated. I mean, this is quite scary now. 83% of US population has an unfavorable opinion about China, and very few are favorable. And if you look at this statistics, which is done by Stanford University back in 2021, we Chinese people don't have much of a good view about US either, you know. Only these two categories, 25% of people have a positive opinion, and all the rest, 75%, either don't know or somewhat unfavorable, or very unfavorable. But isn't that a bit of a scary outlook I mean, these public opinion can be very easily ignited or triggered into something quite scary, you know, for international a family like ours, where I don't feel, you know, I can sort of pick sides so easily. The fact that we seem to be falling further apart does worry me and scare me. Which brings me to this Chinese philosophy that we obviously have our differences. I mean, if we talk about the Chinese, why people have different opinion or a negative opinion of China, quite often is it's not a democracy. Human rights is questionable, and it gave the world COVID, you know, or these draconian lockdown of COVID. But if you ask Chinese people about what our opinion, you know, democracy, sometimes it's not functioning. I mean, look at what's happening. Look at not functioning democracy and human rights, all these gun crime, all these drug crime, you know, all these homelessness. And COVID, you know, even though we had the lockdown, we managed to avoid the very worst in death tolls. But US, at the same time, has one of the highest death rates among developed countries in the world. So you can see their different perspective, and we're different. Hence, there is this Chinese philosophy, which is well known by, again, all the Chinese colleagues here. 各美其美，美人之美，美美与共，天下大同. So it says every form of beauty is unique. Appreciate the breadth of beauty with openness and wonder. When beauty is represented through diversity and integrity, the world is blessed with harmony and unity. We don't just have to celebrate one form of beauty. We can actually appreciate differences. And hence, this lady, when you ask, are you setting up a school like that here? It is indeed my ambition to bring my HEBA immersive bilingual school. So we're going to maybe start with early years and primary only. And currently, we're targeting the Bay Area in San Francisco to set up a HEBA bilingual school in China, in the US, because we think we have something quite unique to offer that combines the very best of international pedagogy and the rigor and the work ethos and the high standards of the Chinese education. But at the same time, we're very much open-minded about establishing links and partnership with schools in the US. I think we should be part of this bridge building effort. Even when you look at the popular media, you know, the government talks, it seems that the two countries are falling apart. But through these human-to-human interaction, people visiting each other, you know, having your students going to China to see what's going on there, talking to pupils in our school, you get a much more realistic view of what's going on in a country as opposed to the media itself. Right, I'm going to skip this, actually. That was a 1-minute brand video. So it takes some courage for me as a Chinese person to come to Washington, D.C. and do a pitch about, actually, there is something quite good about China. Maybe you should know. But I feel safe in doing so because this is the EdFest. This is with educators who, of course, promote critical thinking, open-mindedness, curiosity, dialogue, listening skills. So I feel very encouraged that I have an audience who is open-minded to listen through what I had to say. And this is, after all, the purpose of Wellington College Global. Our statement is pioneering education to serve and help shape a better world. And I think our role, the Wellington College China's role in this bigger picture is building bridges to foster mutual understanding and appreciation between China and the rest of the world, which is currently probably not going the right direction. So it is our job to try to fix that. Thank you very much.